Hi, everybody. This is Chloe Hudson with World Peace Projects. Thank you so much for joining me. So today I want to talk about my perspective on the anatomy of cruelty and spite. Now, cruelty is defined as disposed to give pain to others, willing or pleased to hurt, torment or afflict, destitute of sympathetic kindness and pity, savage, inhuman, hard-hearted, and merciless. This comes from American Heritage Dictionary. My take on cruelty is that it is chaos. It is selfishness, stinginess, and rejection of life. Now, chaos is a very primordial creation energy. If we go back to the creation stories of Apsu and Tiamat, you can begin to understand how chaos in its more pure form is a requirement of creation. And from my perspective, as humanity began to manifest, the emotional body began to manifest, chaos, such as other more pure creation energies, began to filter down and become inverted and distorted through humans' air and the emotional body, trying to transform things that are not emotional, that are not tangible, into their way of experiencing. So as this manifests into reality, it becomes more tainted. And the experience of chaos, specifically through the vein of cruelty, is found in all sorts of offshoots of narcissistic tendencies, victimization, sociopathy, fear, shame, blame, unworthiness, entitlement, piousness, arrogance, smear campaigns, theft, lies, betrayal, deceit, etc. It goes on forever and ever. Now, people utilize cruelty for different reasons. This leads them to act through cruelty, which is a weapon. Cruelty is fired off as a weapon. So it is not the root factor, it is the reaction point. Cruelty hides deep in the subconscious and the psyche, and it is very easy for people to justify and ignore their cruel actions or natures. Cruelty, I find, has a both narcotic and a stimulant effect to the user. So cruelty itself drives the propulsion of the compulsion to be cruel in the first place. The frequency of the thought forms it creates are very megalomaniacal. So they're very self-aggrandized. Within the poison or toxin of cruelty, there is a rush and a high that comes from it because it is basically acting as a drug within your bodies. It also sustains this rush and high for an extended period of time. This can be enhanced by the gloating or the reminiscence of the cruelty that was enacted by the user. Cruelty creates a stupor and a mesmer to the aspect or the alter persona of the person utilizing it. It is very contagious and it is penetrating. So it has the capacity to shatter or crack the recipient's psyche, especially if the recipient is susceptible to fracturing. When cruelty hits, it injects its essence into the fracture point where it has penetrated the psyche, and it begins to seed its way in and parasite the narcosis, the drug effect, and the stimulation of chaos. So just like a lot of other energies we've talked about, it injects in its energies and begins to utilize the host, and it has a parasitic effect. It injects chaos into the host. So this will require that the psyche fractures, even just partially. It creates a cyclone of chaos. This is usually wrapped around greed, self-righteousness. And when the parasite triggers in the host, it then fires its weapon. Now, cruelty is a very localized energy. It travels in a spear or sniper-like laser fashion at its target. The weapon has a localized impact, much like a dagger or a scalpel or a stinger, rather than a dispersed impact, such as a grenade or a shockwave. And because of this, it allows it to penetrate with precision, and it often can be overlooked, so it can then infest the target at its next host. Now, it can be overlooked by those that are receiving it. Maybe you're familiar or used to cruelty, or are not even able to identify possibly covert aspects of what's happening or what's seeding inside them until it comes out to full manifest. Once it subsides, it will lay dormant. So the cruelty and the chaos will lay dormant inside of the recipient, which can then activate within the recipient or the user through the feelings of being wounded, possibly re-experiencing the reason behind why the sender originally contracted the cruelty in the first place. And this can be, again, for the sender or the user. The trigger can bring it up, which then begins that cycle of narcotic stimulant effect. Then when it is triggered, the chaos of disorganized soul fracturing begins to cyclone within the person again. Now, as I spoke of, cruelty is an action state. It is not a resting state. A resting state would be victimization or hate. Hate and victimization are possibilities and probable catalysts to why someone would utilize cruelty as a weapon in the first place. Cruelty usually comes hand in hand with spite. I would call this the serpent's tongue. Now, cruelty is, in my definition of it, a projection of repulsion to organize the fractured self that chaos is stirring. So the user of cruelty has chaos mustering within their being. There is fracturing happening, but they are incapable or refusing to organize their own internal chaos, so they must release it out. Cruelty, like chaos, is maladaptive. Chaos was never meant to have form. It's a pure energy of non-form in its creation purposes. So it cannot be organized. Spite is defined as malicious ill will, prompting an urge to hurt or humiliate another person. Cruel, disposed to inflict pain or suffering. Again, American Heritage Dictionary. Now, when you bring spite into the picture, often spite will catalyze the cruelty. And spite is like a serpent strike. It is triggered and it triggers and propels the cruelty forward. It is the action strike that injects the poison of cruelty. Spite is, in my definition, a very violent rejection of actualizing self-responsibility. At this point, the user of cruelty and spite cannot take responsibility for what's happening in their internal process. So they must repulse it out. They must refuse it and push it into someone else's field or another situation. Spite often stems from jealousy, envy, entitlement, etc. Now, how do we shut this down? Well, for both the user and the receiver, I think it's very important to see it for what it is, and also to see it for what it is not. It is chaos directed towards a target. It is not healthy, fair, balanced, safe, loving. It is not normal competition, desired connection. It is not just, nor is it wise to engage in. And in order to misalign with cruelty and spite, you have to misalign with the entire bandwidth that it resonates on. And we talk about this a lot. All of this is frequential. Right now, you could be experiencing, or you could be the sender as your own individual, though it's an energy and form. We're really speaking about frequency that possibly certain groups or people or situations choose to embody or utilize. But frequentially speaking, there's an entire bandwidth that it resonates on. I'm not saying this is easy to do, though I believe that cruelty is inevitable in this world because we live in a world that covets cruelty. So in order to heal and misalign with the bandwidth, and this bandwidth range, let's just call it like the narcissistic range. I know that term gets thrown around a lot and it gets taken out of context way too much, but when we're speaking of these more toxic type of energies, I think we can see a lot of different experiences that resonate on this bandwidth. So all that resonate with on this bandwidth require you as the user and or the sender, or excuse me, the user or the recipient, to heal clinginess. Clinginess is very magnetic to the entire bandwidth that narcissistic, chaotic, cruel type experience resonate on. When you heal the clinginess within your being, you no longer resonate with magnetizing a need and a holding, whether it is you're holding onto a situation that you want to be cruel to, or you're holding onto a situation where you have been pained and hurt, you're grief stricken through cruelty itself. And in healing clinginess, it's important to dive deep here. None of this we're talking about is surface level. I'm speaking of concepts, but these must be applied on a very deep level. So in order to heal clinginess, we have to understand primarily we are safe to exist. And I find it very important to repeat that to yourself. I am safe to exist. I am satiated. I am full. I do not need to cling. Often clinginess is experienced as an emotional state, but I have found that especially if you track clinginess back to a more infant state, it is actually way more physiological. And your body is experiencing a physiological response that is deeply ingrained into your nervous system. And the way we can process what we're experiencing it is to begin to rationalize it or view it through an emotional standpoint. But it supersedes the emotions, especially if it was ingrained before you have grown into a full emotional body. When you are a child, a baby, an infant, you are having these physiological experiences that activate a lot of fight or flight, PTSD type experiences, and are very deeply ingrained because you were just a young babe. They're still in there and you're growing into it. So I am safe to exist. I am satiated. I am full. This is an absolute requirement. Cleanness, healing, hands down. Now, in addition to this, it's important from, the way I look at it is that everything within this frequency range of this type of chaos leads to a pit of doom, basically. This level of karmic debt demands your enslavement to a type of, energetically speaking, a type of mining labor for the demonic forces and faculties. So energetically, you will endlessly be shoveling coal to stoke the fires of chaos. This is much akin, in an example I'd like to use is Prometheus dragging the boulder up the hill. The difference here is, unlike Prometheus, at this point, you are not yet bound to this fate. You are choosing it. This is a precursor to being bound to the fate, much like Prometheus. Now, on the receiving end, if you're looking to heal it, you must heal the triggers that compel you to engage mentally, emotionally, psychologically, sexually, and physically. You have to see any parts of you that need you to prove your side. Is there anything in you that needs you to have the sender held accountable, that demands justice or that refuses defeat? Because that type of passion, while can very easily be understood and justified, keeps you magnetically inclined and engaged with the cruelty, the chaos itself. So a very common topic or concept here when working with these types of energies is utilizing the gray rocking method. This is where you literally act as become a gray rock. You are not emotion filled. Rocks do not have emotions. You are like an immovable boulder that they are trying to push up the hill. You become the boulder that Prometheus is, destined and fated to labor towards moving. Gray rocking, true authentic gray rocking for frequency, because we're not talking necessarily just person to person. If you are working to energetically gray rock the frequency bandwidth of chaos through cruelty, it requires you to embody genuine disinterest because you cannot full frequency. So neutrality, not apathy, is your most powerful antidote. And of course, as I always talk about, forgiveness equals detachment and misalignment from the energy of chaos in all of its forms. When you misalign with the bandwidth of karma and chaos, you understand that it is not personal to you because you have closed that chapter. And if your consciousness is organized and still, then the cruelty and the chaos will hit you like a massive wall that loses its forward momentum. and it backlashes and scatters. The localized propulsion is shattered and it blasts out in all directions. It does not hurt you. It is like a massive wave hitting a break wall and, casting its spray out in all directions and moving back into the ocean. This recycles the chaos back and out to the sending energies, where it rains down upon them, and there is a mass exodus for you of the chaos and the cruelty. And you are not doing anything but holding your neutral ground of genuine disinterest and non-engagement. Chaos is unorganized by definition. So if your consciousness is organized, if you are still and calm in your being, regardless of maybe anything you're saying or how you are acting, if you have stillness within your frequency, which is opposite of chaos, chaos holds mass excitement, gyration, movement, activity. It is very erratic. It cannot be melded into form. This is your out. This is a saving grace. Now, if you are sending cruelty, you need to identify and harness your chaos, recognize it. It is very important to feel the rush, that high of the compulsion, that narcotic and stimulant effect. Engage with it. Track back now, once you have engaged with that, to what was happening when you begin to fiend for the rush. What was going on for you in your internal process when that need, that compulsion to drive cruelty forward, to seek out the drug, so to speak? What were your thoughts? What are you rejecting? How is this a mirror to what you're rejecting about yourself? Because it absolutely will be. It's simply if you're willing to see it and accept it. What blame is driving your spite? There will always be blame. And if you can track the blame, you can ask yourself, if I claimed this blame as my responsibility, what would I have to accept about myself? It's just a question. I'm not saying you have to do it, but if you're wanting to try, pose yourself this question and be honest with yourself. This is a self process. Find your hate for creator or your God or whatever you call it. Find your hate for yourself. It will be here. And find your hate first and foremost for free will. Because most of the time I find that cruelty and spite come forward through the complete disdain, repulsion of another's free will, or the existence of free will in general, because you weren't able to control the narrative or the situation, their actions, their words, what have you. Now, once you've done this, if you choose to accept your responsibilities and you see your downfalls, it's a requirement for you energetically and emotionally speaking to fall. You have to fall back blindly out of chaos. You have to let go of trying to make that which is intangible, chaos, tangible. You energetically and emotionally fall into a chasm. This chasm will be where you must reorganize and process your internal fracture points, because you cannot organize chaos. You can only become chaos, or you can fall out of it. You do not own cruelty or chaos. It owns you. I hope this was helpful and informative for you guys. If you're interested in classes, coaching, courses, private one-on-one sessions, please check out my website, worldpeaceprojects.global. And if you are wanting to now purchase the pre-recorded telepathy and animal communication course, it is now on sale on my website for $150, and that can be found at worldpeaceprojects.com. I hope you guys are great. Thanks for the likes. Take care.